a day late, but yesterday was International Women's Day, and so I wanted to take the time to appreciate one of the best written anime women I have ever seen, Psycho Pass's Akane Tsunemori. First things first, if you have not watched Psycho Pass, you need to go watch it right now. Throw it all the way up to the top of your list. It is that good. I've been told the beginning is slow, but I didn't feel that way when I watched it. The dystopian world draws you in immediately. We meet a good chunk of the cast of characters in episode 1, and they all seem pretty interesting. From there, an amazing story follows, full of great twists, moral dilemmas, and excellently written characters. I'm going to make a full review of the show at some point, but for now, I'll leave it at that and get back to the main focus, Akane herself. When we first meet her, Akane is nothing more than a bright-eyed rookie who believes in the Sybil system completely. Sybil is basically the governing body in Psycho Pass. It decides people's jobs, who is and isn't a criminal, and everything in between. Akane is starting her job as an inspector for the police force. She's ready and eager to serve justice to the world, and she meets her senior inspector, and he tells her that she's a little unlucky because her first case is about to be a rough one. By the end of that first case, and in the following episodes, Akane begins to see what is wrong with the Sybil system, and she even goes as far as to question her superior based on how he treats the enforcers. Enforcers are individuals with a psychopath score so high that the system has labeled them as latent criminals, and then they use those latent criminals to catch other criminals. Akane sees the enforcers as actual human beings, but her senior officer and people around her treat them as subhuman trash, nothing more than police dogs. I mean, they literally say, "You're just a dog." So Akane, she doesn't really roll that way. She sees that these are actual people with, feelings, and they deserve to be treated a little bit better. So she starts to push against the norm pretty quickly into the show. As she's already questioning the system and she's developing some like interpersonal relationships with the enforcers, Akane is forced into a situation where the flaws of the system become blatantly obvious. So, spoiler warning. I mean, it's kind of impossible to like talk about Akane's development without this spoiler. So go watch the show if you haven't, but I'll go on. So eventually she meets Shogo Makishima. He's, basically the villain of the story. And he kills one of her friends right in front of her eyes. And she's unable to stop him because according to the Sybil system, he isn't a criminal. And therefore the gun, which is literally run by Sybil, wouldn't let her even stun him. So he literally handed her or tossed a shotgun at her and said, you can abandon Sybil and shoot me to save your friend, or are you going to just trust in the system? And in the end, she wasn't able to pull the trigger, so he killed her right in front of Akane. So within the world of psychopaths, people who are labeled, like people who go through traumatic experiences, a lot of the time, the system, because it realizes that their brains have, experienced trauma, ends up labeling them as latent criminals. So, obviously that's very flawed, but Akane's friend, was literally killed like 10 feet in front of her. So you would think that, she would be at risk of becoming a latent criminal. But rather than, just spiraling out of control, she steals her resolve and she decides to stop trusting the system that has literally been running her life and all of society since the day she was born. It's about the halfway point of the show, and she's no longer just this rookie who has no idea what's going on. She's starting to make independent decisions outside of the world system, and she rejects Sybil's definition of justice, and she begins to contemplate what justice really is and how she can obtain that without working with the system. So, despite the fact that she's like enraged at Makishima, she keeps a level head as she pursues him. This keeps her psychopath score nice and low, meaning the Sybil system maintains its trust in her as an investigator. Kogami, on the other hand, he's an enforcer who was under her, and she had been becoming really close with him. It kind of seemed like, maybe we'll go down the path of like a relationship or something. But he was far more willing to choose like the path of violence and darkness because he was already labeled a latent criminal. So he didn't really care if, his score goes up because he's already stuck as an enforcer. Once you're an enforcer, you can't like go back to being inspector or go back to being like a citizen. It's just you're stuck there. It's basically a permanent demotion. So he didn't care. He just wanted to kill Makishima at any cost because Makishima had done something to him in the past. I honestly wouldn't have blamed Akane for either siding with him or like turning the blind eye because, she's already mad at Makishima, but rather than having her psychopath score get messed up, she could have just let Kogami's get even worse and the revenge that she wants would still be served. But she actually wants justice. So, now that she's kind of defined justice in her own terms, she wants to pursue that. She doesn't want to instantly then turn around and betray the definition that she made. Because what's the point of rejecting Sybil's definition of justice if she's not even going to follow her own? So she cares for Kogami, and she understands his reasoning, but she decides to walk her own path, and she's willing to oppose Kogami if she has to. I think one of her best moments comes maybe 2/3 into the show when she personally confronts the Sybil system. She had a chance to shut down the system, but she realizes that if she shut down the Sybil system, she would basically collapse society in that very moment. Because we're talking about a system that runs everything. It's the governing body. It gives you your job. It decides who's a criminal. It provides, no one is unemployed in a world under Sybil because Sybil picks a job for everyone. There's always a job for people to work. And it's a mostly peaceful society, but she realizes that the system is just so flawed. It's I wouldn't say that it's corrupt, but it has very clear flaws when people like Makishima can fly under the radar, go around killing right in front of the cameras, and it won't label them a criminal. Or the fact that, maybe a victim of, some serious crime could end up being labeled as a latent criminal just because they went through a traumatic experience, which is, pretty messed up. So despite the fact that she realizes how messed up the system is, she forces herself not to shut the system down because she doesn't want to cause even more chaos, but she vows that she will find a way to shut the system down. And she even says that to, Sybil's basically like an AI in a way. So she literally says that to Sybil. And she plays it really well. She realizes that she can kind of finesse the system. She says, I'm still an inspector and, I'll do some of your dirty work. I'll, keep criminals off the streets. But the thing is, you got to like let me take care of Makishima in like my way. And so she kind of manages to like go around the system. But, more on that when I get to the actual review of the show. But I think the fact that when we first meet her, she wasn't really capable of too many independent thoughts as an inspector. Now we've reached the point where she's coming up with plans on her own, and those plans are on such a level that she can literally go toe to toe with the system itself in pursuit of her form of justice. The character development was amazing up to that point. Now, by the end of season 1, Akane has become a senior inspector. She still is pursuing justice, and she still technically works for Sybil, but she's completely different than when we met her in episode 1. She's no longer the bright-eyed, naive inspector who didn't know about the cruelty of the world. She's seen a lot of stuff, but she never let it break her. Instead, she took all the struggle, all the pain, and she made that into her greatest strength. Her resistance to this pain and, suffering is what makes it so that she can be an inspector where most inspectors, when they would think like a criminal to catch criminals, it risked them falling, prey to the system, labeling them as a latent criminal. Because she's able to almost, compartmentalize these things, she now is able to catch criminals by thinking the way they think, but she manages to keep her psychopath score down while she does it. So her arc in season 1, it just ends perfectly. She's the senior inspector. A rookie arrives. It's raining like literally the way it was raining when we meet her in episode 1 when she approached her senior inspector. So now Akane has become, the leader. A rookie approaches her. She turns around and she goes, you're out of luck. You got to start your first day off on a pretty rough case. So I thought, the way things come full circle was just absolutely perfect. But where we see a difference from the beginning is whereas her senior had told her that the enforcers she works with are nothing more than dogs to help her as an inspector, Akane tells the new rookie that enforcers are people who should be treated with a level of respect, especially considering how much assistance they provide. So it was nice to see that while she has become, you know, the leader, she didn't change as she became a leader. She stuck with her core values and she now wants to bring those core values to her precinct, basically, which I thought was just amazing because when we first meet her, there's no way that she was leadership material. She was shy, she didn't think for herself, but through, all the crimes that she has to solve and through her pursuit of Makishima, she just grows so much as, a person and as an inspector that it was just so good. And to me, Akane is such a great character because she never really lets things hold her back. She learns pretty quickly how to operate independently. She never lets feelings get in the way of the job, whether they're negative feelings, relationship type feelings. She doesn't let those things get in the way. She makes the tough decisions that others might struggle with after she was forced to make a decision. After Makishima forced her in a decision that she couldn't make, from that point on, she is able to make decisions a lot more quickly because she doesn't want something like that to ever happen again. So it sucks that, her friend had to die for character development, but, sometimes that's actually one of the greatest ways to develop a character in a medium like anime. The difference between her at the beginning of the show and the end of the show is just night and day. She's written so well. Her character development is all backed up by either internal or external processes, or, anything that we see. Like, we see everything that led to her becoming who she becomes by the end of the season. It wasn't rushed at all. You don't think, wow, how did she become, so different than when we first meet her. No, she naturally grows so that when you reach the end of the season, you look and you think to yourself, "My god, she has changed so much from when we first met her." But while you're watching it, it feels super natural, which, shout out to the writers for that. It was also like really, really refreshing to see like a female anime character that they never really like overly sexualized. It's one of those things that, like it kind of happens in anime and you watch it and you're like, haha, the anime things. But it was really nice to see, a female character not get sexualized. Plus, she's like the lead of the story. It was amazing. Rather than, focusing on some of the tropes that we see that, can be a little irritating, in my opinion, they just focused on writing a character who goes from, lacking in individuality to, this like badass lead who can carry a story. And so, Psychopaths, like I said, absolutely worth watching. And I just wanted to show some appreciation for my favorite female anime character.